As I prepare for these episodes of Erudite Magic, oftentimes the question boils down to, do I want to review something new or do I want to look at something older? And I feel like a lot of magicians just don't really care about the older books that much. It's always about what's hot and new. But as I was contemplating this week's episode, my mind kept drifting back to the Tarbell Course in Magic, and I kept wondering over and over, is it still relevant in today's world? I've obviously been an advocate and recommended these books several times, and you can see different videos that I've posted about that. But I want to address that question about their relevance today. As I dug into this, I realized that there's some history that maybe some of us don't already know. This was a mail order course that was written back in the mid-1920s by Harlan Tarbell. Apparently, a magic publisher, Walter Jordan, and his friend T. Grant Cook wanted some sort of instructional course that they could offer to people on a subscription basis. Some things never change, right? After agreeing on a significant payout for writing this course, Tarbell set to work. By the end of 1928, he had written 60 lessons with over 3,000 illustrations. Cook and Jordan sold over 10,000 copies of the correspondence course, but in 1931, they wrapped it up and said they were done because of the Great Depression. Fast forward 10 years later, Louis Tannen out of New York City purchased the rights to the course and started to assemble these correspondence lessons into books. While they were doing that, there were certain things that got cut from the correspondence course, other things that were added, and all in all, we ended up with 8 total volumes, although that's not the whole story. Initially, the first 5 volumes were written by Tarbell and based on the correspondence course. Volume 7 was written by Harry Lorraine and not published until 1972, and then Volume 8 was written by Richard Kaufman and published in 1993. What's in the books? Well, we're going to get into that in just a second to help us decide whether or not they're still relevant for today's magicians. But as you can imagine, with a correspondence course that was just so comprehensive and then this book set that was so massive, it has influenced any number of magicians for decades. And we're basically at 100 years of people performing material from these books. Almost every great magician of the last 100 years has in some way studied this course, learned something from it, or had something positive to say about it. And why is that? Well, it's partially because of the comprehensive nature of these books. Each volume tackles different topics, and these topics are completely comprehensive, covering almost every facet and type of magic that you can imagine, which is why it's so often recommended to beginners, including the series that I did on the 5-foot shelf of magic that you can check out up here. It covers close-up sleight of hand, different techniques that will help you in your ability to present effective card and coin magic. Of course, it also teaches tricks, card tricks, coin tricks, tricks with sugar cubes, tricks with envelopes and paper and pencils, almost every type of object you could conceive of in a magic performance. But it's not just close-up, which I think is where a lot of magic has gone today. It also teaches big stage illusions. There are sections in various books related to mentalism, things with ropes and eggs and silks, items that will play for, yes, a smaller crowd, but also a parlor or even a stage-size audience. Not only that, there is philosophical discussion about why magic works or how to get your audience to laugh, presenting effective mentalism, how to structure your act. Now, as you can imagine, with a resource like this, some of the items and props used, like thimble magic, although it could play for today's audiences, it's just less relevant. But still, there's so much in here that is. So we're going to continue to look at whether or not it's relevant to today's magicians. And as we do so, I'd like to compare the way today's magicians learn magic versus the way they did back when these books were published and have for many, many decades. Today's modern magic resources tend to be focused online. I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't recognize that young people today, or people just getting started in magic, most likely have their first encounter with teaching magic online, whether that's through YouTube, Instagram, or some social media tutorial from someone that they watch online. As they get into the magic flywheel and start to realize, well, you can buy magic, which is often a novel concept for new magicians, they'll start to find resources like online magic shops, potentially even local magic shops, and if they continue going down the rabbit hole, maybe they'll even find the local magic club. And of course, you and I know through all the many purchases we've made over the years, there is a myriad of video tutorials out there, both for purchase and for free. What this effectively means is that today's magicians are learning magic in a relatively unstructured way. They see something online, they want to replicate what they see, so they're taught the basics of how to perform that thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but then they don't have a next step. There is no place to go from there except the whims of an algorithm to push the next video to them, or if they follow a specific creator who's teaching these things, potentially they might follow some sort of progression in that person's curriculum. But let's go back to the Tarbell Course and one of the pros that it offers when we talk about it as a magic resource. That's the structured nature of it. This was a set of complete lessons, 60 original correspondence courses, then expanded into 8 different books. But as you go through the books, you're learning one subject completely, and then you move on to the next. Or if you aren't interested in that, you can skip that section, but there's definitely a progression of the magic. The very first book is pointing you to some of the core tenets of magic, some of the basics, sleight of hand, how to keep a secret, learning not to re-perform the same trick for the same audience. You get the idea. But on the flip side, it is somewhat expensive or cost prohibitive. There's gatekeepers, like there have been for hundreds of years. If you want the Tarbell Course in Magic, you either need to have access to someone in your circle who has them, or you have to be able to cough up the money that it would take to buy each book. Speaking of magic books, if you're looking for a way to purchase magic books more affordably with a great selection and potentially free shipping, then check with the sponsor of this week's video, Don's Magic and Books. Don's an online magic shop based out of Minnesota. He is a small business, and he's focused on magic in the printed word. I love shopping with Don and visiting his website because he's always getting in something different, and it's not always the latest and greatest like we're talking about in this lesson. Many times he has older books that are now out of print or harder to find, and sometimes he acquires an entire collection that needs a new home. So if that appeals to you in finding an older text or something different off the beaten path from what everyone else is studying right now, check out his website. You can find it via the link I'll drop down in the description below. Now don't think that it's just old magic books. He also has the latest and greatest, so no matter what you're shopping for, check with Don's Magic and Books this week. Now let's address the actual relevance of Tarbell in today's world. Do you have to have them up front? I would say no. It's not a requirement to be a good magician, but I do think that if you're a serious magician, if you're serious about studying all types of magic, these definitely have a place on your shelf. No matter where you're learning magic today, whether it's online or through books like this, the fundamentals remain unchanged. Techniques like misdirection, sleight of hand, understanding the psychology behind magic. Tarbell addresses those. And I think it might do so in a way that's more thorough than what you can do in a video. If you start talking philosophy on a video, it's possible that you could lose your audience. And as previously mentioned, it's hard to have that progression of showing a student what they should study next. On the flip side of that, much of Tarbell's material is very outdated in terms of its suggested scripting or sometimes even the props. But like most magic, the material itself is still highly performable. It just requires more work from the magician to translate that, whether it's through a script or taking the props and moving them into a more modern context. Ultimately, whether you find Tarbell to be relevant to your magic is highly dependent on how much work you're willing to put into your magic versus how much you have to be spoon-fed. I think that if you're a beginner, you're probably going to continue with the videos. But as a beginner, you also don't know what you like. You're watching videos maybe of somebody doing a card trick or a coin trick online, you're learning that, showing it to your friends or your coworkers, and they love it. As you progress down that road and decide that magic is the hobby or profession for you, why not give Tarbell a try? If you end up purchasing the entire series, it'll give you a huge width of knowledge where you can study different facets of magic to either help in the one performance that you're interested in or to help you discover a brand new love within this overarching umbrella of our art. As for me, I'm always slightly inspired by Tarbell. I don't go back to the books as often as I should, but I have for many different reasons. He shares old act structures, so he's literally dissecting some of these classic magic acts, what they did first, what they did second, why it works, and trying to pull from there the themes that will help you to put together your act. On top of that, whenever I'm looking for something new, it often pays to go back and look at what's old. I know I found switching envelopes, card techniques, and even mentalism pieces that are just so cool because they're so old and what you're reading probably hasn't been performed by a lot of people. At the end of the day, whether or not the Tarbell series is relevant is up to you, just like any magic material. The latest and greatest book might not be relevant to you either. But if you're looking for a great foundation, a comprehensive guidebook, and something that specifically shows you the way, I think you could do a lot worse than Tarbell. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about the Tarbell series? Sound off down in the comments below with some of your favorite tricks, ways that it's helped you, or even if you think it's an old piece of garbage, well, you can post that too. If you haven't already subscribed to my newsletter, it's one of the places where I'm going to share hidden gems, including things that I found in Tarbell. So hit the link down in the description below if you want some free content and continuing conversation around magic books. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep reading.